name is Angie Vishyanan, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal, and we provide a mentoring program to connect pre-law students to lawyers for mentoring. And we started doing these meetups at the beginning of COVID-19 to collect and connect everyone in the legal industry pipeline. So we wanted to connect pre-law students, current law students, young lawyers, experienced practicing lawyers on these meetups so that you could all learn from each other and connect with each other and not feel so alone during these times. So we've started hosting these every single week, and we bring in 2 guest speakers every week. And today I have with me Selena LaCroix, and she's going to talk about forging your career path and how you can create the career path that works for you and your values and your lifestyle. So Selena, I'll let you take it away. Okay.
No, thanks for inviting me, Angie. I think, what you're doing is a great cause. And I wish I actually had, situations like that as I was thinking about my career as well, as a young law student or a lawyer. So, I want to make this interactive for all you guys. Ask me questions. I'm going to share a little bit about my own background and journey. But more, I want to be a resource to all of you guys. And so as you're starting your journey, I'm sort of an old person here. So let me give you a little bit of my experience and what brought me here to where I am today. Okay, so I actually grew up in Singapore. Like Ananta, I emigrated to the United States. So I started practicing law actually in Singapore. Was a litigator there and did a lot of work in insurance litigation. But I was always fascinated by intellectual property. And, at that time, when I went to law school, we were the first class in Singapore that studied IP law. So I started to try and shift my focus to IP work. And at that time, there was, the start of a lot of enforcement, IP enforcement for counterfeits, for trademark issues. So did a lot of work for cool companies like Disney and the like when I was trying to transform more into the tech IP world. I was then fortunate enough to, I actually got married and I moved to the US. After 5 years of being a litigator, I came to the US and I was thinking, oh dear, now I should try and continue that, But it's very interesting, right? I came to the US. I took a graduate program in Berkeley and Davis on American law, and I was fortunate enough that the California bar said that if I was interested in taking the bar, they actually pre-qualified me to do the bar based on my practice and the fact that I was, graduated from a common law jurisdiction. I don't know what your experience was, Ananta, but that's kind of what I ended up doing. I did the bar exam the first time round. I was very fortunate. I passed it and I joined a big law firm in San Diego. And at that time I was thinking, okay, I should do litigation, right? That's something I'm very comfortable with. But they wanted me to go really back to the ground floor and do motions and depositions. And the truth was I had already, argued at the Court of Appeal in Singapore. And I just didn't feel like I want to go back. So I thought, you know what? If they want me to start at the ground floor, I'm going to do something different. So I started doing M&A work. I decided to switch completely out of litigation, be a corporate lawyer. And at that time, during the mid-90s, there was lots of the first wave of tech had started in Silicon Valley. And my law firm then also merged with the number 2 largest law firm in Silicon Valley to form Gray, Carey, Ware and Friedenrich, which today is now part of DLA Piper. Okay, so I did a lot of tech work and it was really fun and exciting. I still remember I did the incorporation papers and all that for companies like Adobe, Intuit, the first wave of software companies that you see today that are household names, right? But it was very exciting. But I always felt like, I wanted to, what differentiates me from the other smart attorneys in my law firm? They've gone to Harvard, Yale, they're all smart and they are brilliant and they have local contacts. And I'm like a foreigner here, So, but I felt like my advantage was my international background, my understanding of Asia, the languages. So it was with that in mind that when I was recruited by Texas Instruments to go in-house, I thought, now this is a really global company. I've seen TI since I was a kid in Singapore. They've had factories in Singapore, so I know they had a really global footprint. And so I went in-house actually and was their international M&A lawyer. So that was my journey going from a law firm, both in Singapore and then in the US, and then going in-house to TI. And that actually brought me to Dallas, where I still am today. Okay, so TI was, I would say a phenomenal experience. They are a fantastic company, and they really taught me what being in a best-in-class multinational was all about. So I spent 10 years in TI. They rotated me into different roles, one of which was very interesting. I got to live in Taiwan for 3 years. I was the Asia General Counsel for TI out of their Asia headquarters at that time, which was Taiwan. And so, I ended up building a team there and, creating systems and all that for them. And then still came back to Dallas after 3 years and got on to other roles. But, because the company was a great company, nobody left it. So your upward mobility, there's a bit of a glass ceiling for good reasons, really, because people love the company so much, they all want to retire there. So it's a company filled with lifers. But I felt like I really wanted to do more and go further. And that opportunity came when Honeywell recruited me. And I moved to Shanghai. And I was their Asia General Counsel, and it was a much bigger company, Honeywell, than TI is. It had a multi-dimensional product line, from aerospace and defense to chemicals, materials, jets, everything, you name it. I mean, it was, as you know, Honeywell is a big conglomerate. So that was a really fantastic experience as well for me, dealing with a lot of complex issues, compliance issues, investigations. So it was a very interesting time, lots of IP issues as well. And, and it was around that time, it's very strange how things happen, right? Where I actually had to come back to Dallas for a medical procedure. I didn't want to do it in China. And it was for the first time in my life, my doctor told me, I don't want you to running back to Shanghai because I know you always work like a crazy person. You need to recover. You need to spend a good 6 weeks at least recovering in Dallas and be close to me if there are any complications, right? So I took her advice but that was the only time I honestly had time to think about my life and my career. Like, what did I like about it? What did I not like about it? It was really one of those few moments where I had stopped working, right? And could do that. And what was great was, it made me reflect that there were certain things I didn't like about what my current job was. The truth was I wasn't that thrilled about living in China. I mean, it was a great experience, don't get me wrong, and it's great to visit and do deals there, which I have done all my life, but to actually live there, at the end of the day, to be very honest with you guys, living in a communist country is quite different from a democracy that we all have here. Okay, so in fact, the apartment that I was living in, the townhouse, was wired. So you never felt like you had perfect liberty, to say what you wanted. People were listening, right? And as you guys probably know, there's a lot of corporate espionage that goes on in China and also, here all over the world, right? So it was one of those moments where I just pulled back and I said, you know what, let me see if there's something else I could do back in the US. I really rather be home, and I miss being home. So I started talking to different people and, I ended up getting introduced to this company, Egon Zehnder, who I never even heard of, but they were one of the world's largest recruiting and talent advisory companies. When I talked to them, they had a few roles that they were working on, but they were very much trying to convince me to join them. And I thought, well, now why would me as a lawyer want to join an HR sort of recruiting firm? That's crazy. I've spent my life practicing the law. right? And, they were very convincing. They said, hey, we want you to build a legal practice. You're also so strong in tech. You could help us build our tech practice as well. And, I stopped to think about what I wanted in life, and that was when it really, like you say, it hit me that I was looking for a place that had a culture that I resonated with. I really resonated with the TI culture, and that was why I stayed there so long, because I enjoyed the workplace, the people that I worked with, how the company was run. I probably enjoyed less the culture at Honeywell. Not like they had a bad culture, they had a great culture too, but it's different from my DNA. You see, so I was looking for something that fit my DNA. And that was one of the advice I want to give you guys, because it took me a long time. It took me 20 years to figure that out. I want you guys to know that now, because if you go into a company with a culture that fits you, oh my God, life is great. Then you enjoy going to the office every day, because working is hard. We all know that, right? So it's going to be harder if you don't enjoy the people you work with. You don't enjoy how the company is run. It's like, then it's going to be miserable. So think about culture and fit when you are looking at interviewing with companies. Check out on what their culture is like, right? You can go into Glassdoor. You can ask them, what's your culture like? What do you value? Right? What's important? What makes this company successful? There are some companies that are very aggressive. It's like, take no prisoners, we're going to work you to death, and we'll pay you a lot of money, but we're going to really kind of milk you, right? I mean, that's one culture, and companies like Amazon, that's how they work, and if you're not happy, they know that you can leave and they'll get the next person to fill your seat like in 2 seconds, right? But there are also companies that value their employees, that value longevity, that value training. So pick the culture that fits your own DNA, right? Your own style, because that's where you're going to be the happiest. Okay. So from on that point, I was looking for a cultural fit, and Egon Zehnder had that very global company, very collaborative in the way they work, really great, smart people in there. And so that culture piece was very much what I was looking for. Perhaps not the role itself. I mean, like recruiting executives, honestly, was like the furthest from my mind. But the other thing that I thought that they could teach me was leadership. As lawyers, we have never really, we're not a group of people where where the companies come in and say, hey, let's train you to be a better leader. No, I mean, most of us are trained to be good lawyers. We're doers, right? I mean, we're good technically. If they say, here's a contract, or here's a case, that you're going to trial, you're going to be a very good technician. But what I want to express to you that is important in life is, as you start to go up the hierarchy or up the ladder, right, and you start getting more senior, what is going to be much more important is being a good leader, right? How do you recruit your team? How do you mentor your team? How do you help them grow? How do you delegate work to them? That's all very important. Lawyers who only know how to keep control within themselves and do a good job themselves are very poor leaders. And if for the group of you who are going to go in-house, in a corporate setting especially, being a good leader is extremely important. Okay, so that was one thing that, I thought Egon Zehnder could definitely teach me. So even if I ended up not liking the profession, I would learn how to be a better leader. And that was at the level that I was at that point. I was leading a lot of teams, right? But never really got into the training of how to be a good leader. But as you can tell, long story short, I stuck with that. I've stuck with this profession. It's given me great satisfaction. I recruit not only general counsels, which is my legal path, I also recruit CEO and board members of a lot of big tech companies. I've helped them build out their teams, and it's really amazing to see, what good leaders can make a huge difference to a company's success or failure, really. And you see that, right? And as a lawyer, the integrity of your leadership is so critical. I think you guys have seen in the past couple of years with all this Me Too issues, with leaders who are, who actually condone racism, discrimination. I mean, it's terrible, right? And even the most, big name leaders, like the leaders at Uber, at Google, I mean, you see them falling apart because they don't have the values and integrity. And if you as a lawyer are in their organization, you just imagine how hard it is to serve those people, because they'll expect you to always blur those lines. Yeah? And you need to have that backbone, to know what your value sets are, right? So to me, it's been a fascinating journey for me to have worked now about 12 years in this world and helping companies select good leaders. And I would say the last part of my career now, as I've embarked on the last 3 or 4 years, I also sit on boards, on public boards. I've been very fortunate. That's been a new area of growth and development for myself. I've sat on a couple of technology boards. I currently sit on the board of a company called Renesas. It's the largest Japanese semiconductor company in the world, for Japan today. And so it's very different. I'm the first foreign female in their boardroom. So you can imagine, again, lots of learning, lots of challenges, but also lots of opportunities.
That's awesome, Selena. I've loved hearing about your story. So I'm curious to know, so how do you, as a young lawyer, even figure out what your values are? I mean, I felt like when I was in law school, nobody was talking to you about that. Nobody was like, hey, you need to figure out what you actually care about. Everybody was just so eye on the prize. I need to get good grades. I need to be competitive.
That's right.
I need to be cutthroat. Like, there was nothing about, I need to be figuring out what matters to me. What advice do you have for law students who are still trying to navigate this world and figure out, what are some examples of things that you experienced in your career where you were like, this was not a good culture fit, or this was really a good culture fit for these reasons? What were the things you latched onto in either of those situations?
I think all of us will have to journey through that, right? I mean, like I tell you to think about it, but it's hard to imagine when you're so young in your career not having had some experience in some real organizations, right? So you will know, and I think it's like I say, it's a total journey of yourself, but I want you to have an awareness of it, right? Because I had less of an awareness. It was more kind of you fall into a situation, and sometimes you don't have a choice. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, it's hard to find a great job, right? So if tomorrow, you get an offer from White & Case, Sherman & Sterling, Cravath. I mean, these are great firms, right? And you coming out of law school, you think, boy, I need to jump in it. And you should, right? Because you really, at that point, don't have much of a choice. But when you get in there, you will realize, each firm, actually, if you start keeping your networks, you'll find out that Cravath is run very differently from Wachtell. They're also run very differently from Baker Botts. Or, so every firm has their culture, right? As every corporation has their culture. You will only experience it truly when you're in there. You can do some research by talking to people who are there before or people who are currently there. You can read Glassdoor reviews about how their culture is, but you don't really experience it till you're there, right? And I would say in your first few jobs, that's you go into it, and frankly, if it's a good high reputation company, you should join them. You shouldn't say, hey, I've heard that all these bad things about you guys, right? Unless it's really bad, okay? I mean, then and you can see that too publicly, right? If it's if they have real problems, but keep your antennas up, right? Fine tune it as you go through your initial job experiences. What did you like about this company? And what did you not like? What were the challenges? Because what likes resonates with you. So then as you journey further and into your career, you start to eliminate companies that have too much of what you don't like. Like if you are the person who is not a really, sort of sharp elbows, aggressive, in law school, there are some real aggressive people, right? Heads down, I'm going to be the top in my class. And, and I'm going to push you guys aside, right? These people will thrive, let's say, really well working in a New York private equity firm, because that's the culture they cultivate, right? That aggressive, take no prisoners, win at any cost. But if you're not that person, then why join a New York private equity firm? You'll be miserable, right? Maybe it's better to go in-house working for UT Southwestern, which has more of a academic, medical innovation type of culture, so you kind of pick your lanes as you grow, but just be sensitive over, once you get in there, get your antennas up about, even write on a sheet of paper, what do I like about my job? What do I not like about my job? So when you go into your next job, you actually have a plus and minus column. I think a lot of us don't do that. And honestly, I didn't do that as a young person. I kind of fell into my jobs because these opportunities came by or I was recruited, But just giving you guys a sense of, just being a little bit more sensitive and in tune about those things will help you kind of, get jobs that you really would enjoy in the future, and also maximize your own strengths,
Yeah, we had a question in the chat box about how do you change from one practice area to another in a large law firm?
In a large law firm, I would say that's a little bit harder because sometimes, you're kind of in that swim lane and you're very, and you're hopefully pretty good. Let's say if you're a corporate person, it's harder to go boom into litigation. I mean, I did that because I went from different countries. So I got 0 credit for my litigation experience by my US law firm. Trust me, I had to start as a first-year associate. They gave me 0 credit, right? So sometimes you do that because and you end up having to go, a few years back, because if you're on a partnership track, it's very hard to say, I've done 5 years of corporate work, now I want to be a litigator or I want to be a tax lawyer.
I want to just break this down a little more because there's a lot of pre-law students on. So how it normally works in a large law firm is, so you come in as a young associate, right? And you're moving up the ladder, and there might be a number of different ways to make partner. But not everybody wants to make partner these days. It used to be that the only two dichotomy was associate and partner. And the thought was every single person wanted to eventually become a partner. But that has changed a lot. And now there's all these alternative roles that you'll find, like counsel, senior associate. There's a lot of different roles that you might take along that track. But the typical track is you come in as an associate, you work your way up, and then, at 7 or 9 or 10 years, you become a partner. And it's not a guarantee by any means. It's not like, oh, you just keep putting in the time and boom, you're a partner. Like, no, you have to be voted in, by all the partnership. And there's a bunch of criteria that go along with it. Like, are you bringing in business, or, are you making your billable hours, or there's all these criteria that go into it, but basically there's a seniority to it, right? So, and they'll typically measure this by class years at really large law firms. So they'll be like, you came in at the class of 2013, so this year you're a second year, next year you're a third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year. And that will determine your compensation, and it'll also determine your bonuses and all sorts of other stuff. And so what Selena means by giving you no credit is that she came in as an experienced lawyer from another country, but they knocked her back down to like a first year associate level. So she's making, the same like compensation as the first years, and you still have to work your way up all those years to get partners. So that's what she means. So, and this is very typical. If you try to switch practice areas, you now are costing the firm money because they're training you in that new practice area. So they're going to knock you back down to a first year, second year, third year level, because there's only so many of your skills that may be transferable from practice area to practice area. Now, if it's an area that's like very closely related and you might still have some. So for example, I was also an intellectual property. I was a trademark and copyright lawyer. So I did both at my first firm, which was a boutique. I did both litigation and transactional work. And once I went to my new firm that was Big Law, they wanted me to only do transactional work. And at some point I did talk to them about, well, what happens if I decide to switch all litigation? And, you know, because I do have some IP litigation experience, but now I would be going to general litigation. And they said, well, we would give you a little bit of credit on your years, but it wouldn't be the full amount, you know? So I just want you guys to get a sense of how that works, because that was something that I totally didn't understand as a very, very young lawyer. So yeah, just wanted to illuminate that for you. But yeah, Selena, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, what was your question?
Thank you, Ms. LaCroix. So I had a question about, for example, a law graduate. What should be the right approach at a law firm for an entry-level position? Basically, after you have graduated, you know, you've got your degree, but then you have you have an experience which is less than a year. So it kind of gets a little challenging. So I wanted to like ask what should be a right approach of you know, looking for a position at a law firm.
So I think, Ananta, you have a similar, you know, situation as me. You came from India, I know, and so graduated there, and then you did your LLM, and now you're saying what's next, right? So I think for the folks who graduated locally and who've lived in the US, there's a classical way of going into these law firms through summer associate programs, right? You sort of get onto a summer associate track, and then hopefully after several different summer associateships, you get offers to join them when you graduate. So for someone like you, Ananta, I think you would have to just kind of, you would be sort of not part of that summer associate, just like, which is what I did. I actually kind of I just applied to work for a different law firm, basically, and interview. The law firm route is what you want to do. If you want to go directly in, possibility too, right? Because they, you know, if you go on to, especially today in you know, on LinkedIn, on you know, Indeed.com, I mean, you have so many career websites and also the company's websites, right? So they are posting a lot of these roles. So if you're interested in saying, hey, you know what? My goal, or at least my first priority, is not to join a law firm, but to go straight in-house. And I'm in DC, and I would like to ideally join a company that is in the defense world. Okay, for example, right? So if you start to narrow your targets, not like you will get your wish list, but at least it tells you where to go first, right? So there are a lot of defense companies in DC, like Lockheed, Boeing, you know, SAIC. I mean, you've got a whole group of them. Go into their website, see if they are posting any of their openings, because oftentimes you'll see it. Also you know, if you're a member of the American Bar Association, once you guys take the bar and you're part of ABA has a ton of postings in different states, different companies, firms, and also corporate positions. So make sure that you are properly networked into these, you know, avenues, especially for you, Ananta, since you don't have a traditional, but even the traditional folks, if you come out and you didn't get an offer from a law firm, then this is kind of the process that you have to work through, depending on what you want to do, right? But I think to Angie's original point is that, you know, don't feel like, you know, that you can only take two paths, right? Either being a lawyer in a law firm or an in-house, right? There are also many jobs within the government, right? In the US government, you can join the SEC group, you can be a US attorney, you can be in the DOJ, in the Department of Justice, you could even be in the Foreign Service, you know, because a law degree is very highly valued there. Right. So if you need to think broadly about what a law degree can do for you. I mean, I personally think the law degree is highly valuable for several reasons. One, it forces you to think critically. Okay, you're very good at spotting issues, right? You're trained to look at case law and problems and spot issues. You're also very good at analysis and problem solving. Once you start to get into the actual practice of law, your negotiation skills are also very good, because let's say you have to negotiate a contract or you have to go to court, and there's a lot of negotiations that are involved. That starts to become very good as well. So based on what you find great comfort in, let's say you are very good in moot court. You've seen that in law school. You can go and be a litigator in a law firm, but you know what? There are a lot of roles in the government that you can take on as well, right? Like I say, join the U.S. Attorney's Office or DOJ or white collar crimes division. I mean, there's a lot you can do in using your skill sets, right? If you feel like you're not the litigator type, well, you could be in academia, you could be in research. If you want to think completely out of the box, you can go into journalism. There are a lot of lawyers who write very well and who are very investigative in their mindsets, and they go into journalism, right? I've seen, lawyers actually become business people. I mean, if you look at, I mean, that's right, like Angie. So, I mean, if you look at some of the big companies in the world, Pfizer, Citibank, Cisco, Home Depot, a lot of their CEOs were lawyers before. So they've risen to the very top, right? The ones who have much more of an entrepreneurial, sort of bent. I mean, in Texas, we have some very good examples in Texas, actually. I don't know if you heard of Texas Pacific Group, but TPG is one of the biggest private equity in the world today. And David Bonderman, who's a lawyer, he was the one that founded it. Kinder Morgan, which is a big oil and gas company, Richard Kinder is a lawyer. He founded that because he realized there was a new way to set up how these what they call MLPs, but a special purpose vehicle to own oil and gas and natural gas facilities. But because he understood the regulatory environment, and he was very creative in the way he wanted to see a structure that could be optimized in that industry, he was able to set up, what today is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So there's so many paths that you can go as a lawyer. But then that might also be confusing. I get it. So, I mean, like in Angie's case, she started practicing law and then she found her path later. I did the same, right? I mean, it took me 20 years of practicing law to do something different. So,
if you really, the best way that you can go about your career exploration, if you really don't even know where to start, is to start talking to other lawyers in the career paths that you think you might want to pursue. And I wouldn't call them up and ask them for a job. Like, that's the last thing I would do. I would just call them up and be like, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what kind of lawyer I want to be. And I'm looking around at all these different career paths.
That's right.
Just get to know more about, how you became you. What was your career path like? How did you make these decisions? And is there, anything that you would have changed about your path? Is there a more direct way that you would have gone to get to your path? Or is there, any advice that you would have for somebody coming straight out of law school who wants to pursue your path? Because I think a lot of lawyers are very, very empathetic right now to the people who are coming out of law school. Like, we realize it's a hard time. Like, we know you guys are, dealing with a lot of other things other than, I just came out of law school. I mean, many of you are dealing with delayed bar exams. Many of you are dealing with all sorts of complications because of COVID-19. And we get that. We can't just, most of us can't just offer you a job because we don't have one to offer, but we're totally willing to share our time and just talk to you about, what is our job like? and help you figure out if that's something that's, interesting to you. I think that it's all about your ask. If you approach a lawyer and you're like, hey, would you mind jumping on a 15, 30-minute virtual coffee chat with me so I could learn more about your career path? Almost all lawyers would say yes. But if you say like, oh, do you have a job available? They're just going to say no, and then they're not going to bother doing the, informational interview with you afterwards. So
that's right.
It's all about your ask, what you're asking for. And if you really want to learn, if you don't know what's important to you, go figure out what's important to other people, and like, does that person seem, similar to you? Does that person, your values align with that person's values? Because they can help show you how other human beings have navigated, exactly what you're going through. So I would just talk to a lot of lawyers and in all sorts of different practice areas. I mean, I remember I had a wonderful mentor before going to law school who was kind enough to introduce me to lawyers from all sorts of different backgrounds. I mean, I didn't know the first thing about any of these practice areas. And he had me talk to bankruptcy lawyers, real estate lawyers, white collar crime, lawyers who were clerking for judges, lawyers who were in the foreign service, lawyers who were doing everything you could imagine. And, through talking to all these people, I discovered that there's just no straight path. Most people think there's a straight path and I'm not on it. But there is no straight path. Like, most people just completely fall into whatever they decided to do. And I think that, when you talk to those people about how did they navigate their own careers, it'll be very enlightening for you, because some of them will say, I talked to some in-house counsels that said, like, yeah, nowadays it's a lot more common for in-house to hire straight out of law school. I mean, that used to not be the case at all. And I was totally surprised to hear that, So I think that you need to just talk to people in the career path that you're interested in and, approach it with curiosity. Approach it with, empathy and kindness and curiosity, and you'll be amazed, the kinds of results that you get. And I can't even tell you how many of those informational interviews that I conducted that turned into job offers just by total accident. They were just like, you just happened to contact me, and I just heard down the hall they're looking for an intern doing such and such. And yeah, I mean, you'd be amazed. Sometimes those conversations turn into much more, but don't go into it looking for a job right away. Go into it with the curiosity of, I just want to learn more about what this career path.
Okay, so that's very good advice from Angie, but here's another bit that you want to be very, very mindful of when you do that. So if you say, hey, I want 15 minutes of your time and blah, 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 because I'm interested in XYZ, right, for us to have a coffee chat. Make every impression count, okay? Yeah. You don't want to go in and waste that opportunity. So guess what? You need to do your homework. Okay? You need to find out what this person's background is. And trust me, I tell you this because even today when I interview CEOs, some of them don't, I bother to look at all their backgrounds. I bother to research about them. If they feel like, they're talking to like a 2x4, or like I'm not a person to them, trust me, they have no EQ. Okay? No, seriously, right? I mean, yes, I might not be the most important person to them, but guess what? I am the gateway now to their next job. And so maybe if you had a little bit of EQ to find out about me, you would not ask me a stupid question, like which they do sometimes. Because guess what? The world is so open today. When I was growing up, there was no internet. There was no way of finding out about people, right? But today you can. You can go into LinkedIn. You can go into their corporate websites. You can go and Google them. If they've written an article about bankruptcy law and that's what you're interested about, bring that up when you speak to them, like, oh, you know what? I actually read that article that you wrote about bankruptcy law, and really it was very interesting to me, your point of view, So, would you mind spending 15 minutes talking to me, because that's an area I'm really interested in. So you see, when you connect with people based on the fact that you're sort of making that connection, versus just like, hey, I'm so-and-so and I want to talk to you. It's like, okay, fine. But, if I gave you that time, I want that conversation to be memorable. I want to know that Catherine did some research on me. She asked me like, oh, you're from Singapore. That was where my aunt lived, and she told me all about Singapore. I would immediately feel like, oh, you know what? She bothered to look at my background. And people resonate with that. So do your homework. When you get that valuable time with these people, do your homework about them personally, about their firms or their companies, so they know that you're thinking. You're not just like, here I am, it'd be great if you could give me a job or an internship. But the ones that I end up going the extra mile for are the ones that really do their homework and the ones that really create that impression. Even if it was 15 minutes, I have a good impression of you. And now I will remember, right? Even if I didn't have anything, if I talk to a friend the next day and they talk about the fact that they are looking for interns, I'm going to say, well, guess what? I spoke to this young lady, Gabby, the other day, and she really made a good impression on me. And she is interested in being an intern in a law firm. So maybe I could connect her with you. I wouldn't do that if Gabby and I had a conversation that was a lousy one. Because trust me, it also impacts the person making the recommendation, because you surely don't want to recommend someone that turns out to be a dud, right? Because then your friends or your contacts are going to say, what's going on? Why did she, bring this kind of person to me, right? So please take those moments very, very seriously. Even if it's for a casual coffee chat, do your homework. Okay?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wanted to hone in on something else that you said, Selena, because I think it's important when you're getting into your job to do that inventory that she was talking about. Every few months for yourself, think, am I still happy here? Do I like being here? What do I like about being here? Because I think as a young associate, it's so easy to put your head down and just do the work. And you're working and working and working. Next thing you know, you look up, it's been 3 years. And you're like, how did I spend 3 years here? And I'm miserable. So I think it's important to do exactly what Selena said. As you're there, take an inventory, write out your pros and cons list, right? And say, I really like working for this firm because I have a good mentor. They care about me. I like, the people that I'm working with. I don't like this firm because the billable hours are super high, or maybe I don't like the people that I'm working with, or, my admin hates me, like whatever it is. Like, I think you just need to make your list so that you can gauge for yourself, like, am I going in the right direction? There's no reason nowadays to waste your time at a place that isn't giving you opportunities to grow, and that isn't going to serve you well, because there are other jobs out there. And once you become a second, third, fourth year associate, you become very valuable and lateral. And, that's about the sweet spot. About 3, 4, 5 years, you can lateral into another firm and find another job because you've proven yourself. You've been able to survive at a firm for a couple of years and you have that under your belt. So constantly at every stage of your career, you should be checking in with yourself and thinking like, okay, what have I learned about myself in this role? What have I learned about what I like, what I don't like, what I value, what I care about? And is the organization that I'm currently at aligned with me in those things? And if not, how do I go and find organizations, that are aligned? And when you're doing informational interviews, when I was interviewing to lateral from one firm to another, I was lateraling into an intellectual property group. But what I did was I called up their associates in other practice groups, and I wanted to get the scoop on, hey, what's the reputation for your IP group? Is it a labor mill, or is it or do people actually stay there long term? Do they like each other? Are they cutthroat? Are they nasty? Tell me what it's like. And for the most part, people are pretty honest about those things. And so, if you're thinking about going to a firm, that you could get the inside scoop from some people at that firm, what the culture's like, you should ask them what are, the different things that are important to you and whether or not that firm really takes a stance on any of that stuff. If diversity is really important to you and that firm doesn't take a stance on diversity and doesn't really put their money where their mouth is in diversity, then that it's not going to be a good culture fit. So I think, the more that you can figure out what's important to you, take the time in each of your roles to figure that out. And then, start designing your path and being more intentional about asking for roles that align with your values. All those things are things that I wish I would have done more of at a very, very junior level. And you can do that really no matter how much experience you have. Okay, sure. There's going to be times that you feel like you're powerless, especially when you're trying to get that first job out of law school, but you really aren't powerless. I mean, you can really do a lot, and it's going to involve you putting yourself out there a lot, putting yourself out there and being willing to talk to people, being willing to ask questions, being willing to do things that, you probably have never forced yourself to do. But, and it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to say that it's comfortable at all. But if you do that now, it'll save you a lot of grief from, being at the wrong culture fit. Because you're going to feel that dissonance from day one. And the longer that you're there, it's going to continue to struggle inside you. So really take the effort to do it as early as possible. Start thinking about what are your values, how are your positions aligning with those values, how can you find jobs that align with
No, good. I mean, good point there. And Catherine, I think I take your point there too. I mean, you always have to balance, right? And weigh why you stay or go. And stability is a very important factor. And honestly, trade-offs have to be made, right? In a very difficult time like this with COVID and all that, sometimes you don't have the luxury of picking like your favorite place to work in, And hey, all of us have been through that journey, right? We've had places that we love better than others. We have had other reasons to stay. Hey, sometimes you have to pay your mortgage or your rent. You know what? You stay put, right? And until you find the next place. So no, I think as you develop and grow, into your roles and into lawyers or beyond, it's you have to weigh practical considerations. One of the things I want to also leave you guys with, which is really important, and it's important to start early, is to make sure that you cultivate mentors and sponsors along the way within your organization and also outside. Okay. So, because sometimes, it's very hard, like as a young person, as a young professional, an organization can be very overwhelming, right? And you're just there as like a tiny cog in the wheel, trying to work really hard and, and put your head down and do stuff, right? And sometimes it's hard to see and know what goes on in these complex organizations. It's always good to have a mentor or a sponsor that maybe is not even in your direct organization. If you can find someone, let's say you're in the legal department, right? But, let's hope that, you need to be a good networker a little bit, even within your own company, right? So let's say you are supporting the marketing group. That's your job, as a lawyer for the marketing group. Let's say you do a good job for them. And let's say this marketing vice president ends up, you can feel a good chemistry, right? It's okay to say, hey, I feel like, we work well together. Would you mind sort of being my informal mentor? Ask for it, right? And so nobody's going to say, well, no, that would be an awful person, right? So the chances are they're going to say, of course, and then you just, then it's back to you to being judicious about how you use their time, right? So you can say, hey, you know what? Why don't we do a lunch at the cafeteria once a month, and we can have a chat about anything, right? It could be partly social. It could be learning more about the company. It could be asking her or him for feedback on how you're performing, what you're doing well, what you're doing not so well. Those are all important things as you grow. But make sure you do that, and then of course have also mentors or sponsors that are outside of the company, because they give you an outside view of what's going on, right? Like what Angie is telling you is what a mentor would tell you, or what I tell you today, because we've had certain amount of experiences in our lives. And of course, we want to pay it forward. We want to share it with you so you don't walk into those holes. But, sometimes that's the only way to learn. But being able to sidestep some of them versus falling into too many, it's a good thing, right? So always make sure you cultivate a network of people who are your supporters, and who are also not afraid to tell you what is the truth, and you as a person receiving feedback have to be very open too. Because there are some people who are not very good at receiving feedback. If they are being criticized about something, they're like, oh God, I'm not going to do that. Is that me? No, that's not me, right? You have to be open. When you ask for the feedback, when you receive it, you should act on it. That's one of my advice I want to give it to you guys, because that's the only way you can grow.
And the way that you return the kindness of your mentor is when they give you that advice, you take it, and then you report back to them like, hey, I went and took your advice, and either that turned out the way I thought it did, or it didn't turn out the way that I thought it did. But it lets your mentor, close that feedback loop, because this happens to me all the time as a mentor. And I'm like, I can give you certain advice. If I haven't been through that situation that you're asking about, I can give you an educated guess as to what I think is a good path for you. But it really helps me if you say, yes, I went and executed that thing, and it worked or it didn't work for me. And then I know, like, oh, okay, that advice was good or it wasn't good. And, even as mentors, we are growing from our own mentoring relationship. So it's important that you continue to feed that back to your mentor, whether or not those strategies are working or if they're not. And I think, by doing that, your mentor will realize like, oh, this person is responsible. They're accountable. They will go and take this advice and do something with it. And it's not just falling on deaf ears. And, when they do that, they will report back to me, and that shows your diligence and follow through. And those are all things that make a really, really good mentee. So, but Selena's totally right in that you do need to have a group of, mentors. I would say a group of mentors outside of your organization as well as inside. Because if you do happen to work for an organization where you get in there and you're like, something's not quite right here, something's fishy, I don't like it, you're going to need people who you can talk to outside of your organization to be like, something doesn't feel quite right here, and I really could use some advice on how to navigate this in a way that, is not going to hurt my future. And I think it's really important to be able to have that sounding board outside of your own organization, because sometimes there's conflicts within your own organization that whoever's your supervisor or maybe your assigned mentor in your organization, their best interest might not be your best interest. And so it can be very challenging to navigate. Yeah, so I know we're at the top of the hour here, so does anybody have any last questions for Selena? If not, feel free to connect with everybody, afterwards on LinkedIn, and we will be posting the recording for this meetup on our YouTube channel. So if you need to go back and rewatch some of the advice, you can. And next week, we'll be having another meetup on Tuesday and Thursday. And then we also have our virtual happy hour next Friday. So if you haven't been to the virtual happy hours before, it's really fun. We bring together pre-law, current law students, and young lawyers, and we break you out into breakout rooms. You get to chat with people one-on-one. And then we switch you all around, and you get to chat with a new person. So it's very interactive, and I think you'll really enjoy being able to talk to a lot of other people. So come and hang out with us next week. So I'll see all of you soon. Thank you so much for your time, Selena. We really
Thank you. Thank you, guys.